All right, my guest tonight in New York, editor for Silicon Alley Insider, Dan Frommer is here. Dan, welcome back to the old loop, sir.
Thank you.
Now, listen, a handful of companies spent, I don't know, just over $19 billion in the most lucrative government auction ever. But what exactly did they win? I mean, we say 700 megahertz spectrum. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, it's funny. What it is, it's a chunk of airwaves, and it's the license to use those airwaves for wireless services. So, for example, Verizon or AT&T or whoever else wins the spectrum gets to use these airwaves to sell you mobile internet or phone service or whatever it is they're going to do with it.
Right, and I think it's important to point out that we hear Verizon, we hear AT&T, and we hear wireless, we automatically think cell phones, but there could be a myriad of applications that all run in the spectrum, right?
Absolutely. I mean, cell phones are the most obvious thing that jumps out at you. But when you think about it, there are millions of people with Air cards for their laptops now. So that's something that these new faster internet products might be good for. There could be other devices. Maybe your iPod Touch or your iPhone will have a second internet connection using this spectrum that might be faster than what's currently available, or maybe something like the PlayStation Portable or the DS will get super fast internet access hooked into it. Instead of Wi-Fi that's kind of limited to a hotspot, these are things that could be citywide or nationwide or whatever.
Right, so again, for the iPhone users out there, there's a chance we might be able to load like a 4 kilobyte email in under 3 hours on AT&T?
Yeah, right?
Now, when we say Verizon was in there, I know they had this entire spectrum, they chopped it up, they sold it out bit by bit. Why is Verizon considered the biggest winner?
Verizon, well, besides the fact that they spent the most money, Verizon has bought basically almost the whole country on what's called the C block. So they don't have to do too much cutting and pasting to get this new nationwide network to cover all 50 states. They pretty much have one solid chunk that covers pretty much their entire business area, and I guess it's going to be easier than if they had to do it piecemeal. Here's some in one region, here's some over another city. And
I heard that the chunk that Verizon bought actually has more bandwidth than the other chunks, so theoretically that could mean their service could run faster or have more features on the spectrum?
I'm guessing it has more to do with how many devices they can get on the actual, on the spectrum, as opposed to how fast or how slow it's going to be. But you know what? That's a great question.
Well, and what can AT&T and Frontier Wireless do with the blocks that they won? I mean, I know you said it's trouble they have to piece it together, but is there certain applications that will only run on the Frontier? Or I heard something about two-way communication isn't possible for them?
Right. So here, AT&T bought a bunch of this spectrum last year from a company called Aloha. So AT&T can patch this and that together and do the same thing Verizon is going to do, which is probably just add another faster tier of service to their existing businesses. Frontier Wireless represents the Dish Network, one of the satellite companies, and they bought a chunk called the E-Block. The E-Block is best for sending stuff in one direction, not two-way fast communication. So the thinking there is if they keep it, if it stays with Dish Network and doesn't go to EchoStar, their old parent, or doesn't go to, if they don't sell it to someone, they might be able to set up a mobile TV service similar to the Media Flow service that Verizon is offering right now that AT&T will soon be offering.
Okay, I get it. And the difference between that and perhaps a Media Flow is that they flip a switch and it could be nationwide coverage overnight for a service like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, now I've been described online and by my father as a happy loser, but some people are now describing Google as that. How on earth can they be a happy loser in this auction?
So Google's goal right now is to get Google services and Google ads on as many phones as possible and to have no one block that. So what Google did last summer was say, hey, if you give us this stuff that we're calling open access, which requires the network operator to allow any cell phone or any device that's compatible on that network, and also any software application, that Google said, all right, well, we'll go ahead and bid the minimum winning bid on this chunk of spectrum. So what happened was Google did bid in the auction. They were outbid by Verizon. So they didn't spend a dime in the end, except their lobbying costs. But what they did get is that Verizon has to operate this network in this open fashion. So if someone wants to use a Google service on their device, whether it's a computer or a cell phone or whatever, Verizon has to let them. So Google gets more eyeballs on its websites. Google gets more eyeballs on its ads.
Right. And now
Google gets more money.
They have Android as a platform out there running on all these cell phones, which can all work on that Verizon chunk of network now. So essentially, all this talk of Google wanting to get into the cell phone space, they never wanted to be a provider. They just want to kind of maybe bluff their way in so their software, their hardware, their ads actually appear on that network, right?
You know, we never know if Google wanted to be a provider or not, but it turns out in this situation, they're not going to be.
Right. Now, and what about Google getting into white space? I keep hearing announcements about that. Is there any word on what they're going to do with this white space that's out there?
Yeah, so as the 700 megahertz spectrum gets shifted away from TV to these wireless providers, there's chunks in the middle of the TV channels called white spaces. Google, Microsoft, Motorola, Dell, a bunch of companies have argued to the FCC, hey, this is a lot of spectrum that's going unused. This is very valuable. Let's open it up to use on an unlicensed basis. So there would be no auction, there would be no payments. It would be like Wi-Fi is today. We can send data from one place to another place as long as it doesn't interfere with these TV channels.
All right, so Dan,
so far,
when are we actually going to see this stuff? We're sadly out of time, but I want to know, when is this going to affect you or I? When are we going to get services that run on this spectrum and actually have them in our hands?
So the spectrum that was auctioned off, 2009 February is when the TV stations have to leave that spectrum. I'm guessing 2009, 2010, 2011 is when we'll see stuff that operates on this spectrum.
So by 2047, we'll finally have the features that they've had in other countries for years. I'm so excited, Dan. Dan,
Exactly.
As always, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate you coming on and keeping us in the loop.